For thousands of years, legends around the world have spoken of humans that are significantly larger than the rest of us. Some say they live in the clouds, others point to caves, hidden forests, and possibly even in the center of the earth. But so far, we're yet to officially hear proof that they truly exist. There are, however, signs of their presence all over our planet. And here are 15 times that people spotted evidence of giants on Earth. Before we begin, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos every day. With that being said, let's begin. Number 15. Giant footprints discovered in temple. Hidden within the Syrian village of Ain Dara, to the northwest of the city of Aleppo, is a mysterious temple that's raised a number of questions about the people who used to live in the region. It was first discovered in 1955, when a large basalt lion was unearthed, and since then, several other fascinating objects have been found. The platform of the temple itself was surrounded by statues of the mountain gods and mystical creatures which were all carved from huge pieces of basalt rock. There was a large staircase that led up to the main room of the temple, with lions and a sphinx on either side. And there were also a number of other rooms where ceremonies and rituals would have taken place. The feature that stands out the most about this place lies at the entrance of the shrine. However, there are two footprints, each of which measures just over 3 feet long and are engraved into the stone. But why are they here? Are they carvings in honor of giants that were worshipped, or where the giants would stand when they were worshipping at the temple? The only way to know for sure is to continue excavating the site to see what else may still be waiting to be discovered. Number 14. Giants found in Shandong, China. In Shandong, an eastern province of China that's located on the Yellow River, people have always believed that they were taller than average. Could they actually be the reason why myths of giants began in the first place? Confucius, for example, was born in the region, and he was around 6 foot 2 inches tall, which doesn't sound so unbelievable these days, but was significantly taller than average during his lifetime more than 2,500 years ago. For further evidence, a team led by the University of Shandong began archaeological studies in the province in 2017. They found in a village of Jiaojie the remains of 104 houses and 205 graves that date back more than 5,000 years ago. Of those that were buried, the average height was 5 feet and 9 inches, again much taller than other nearby people at the time. This was though an average figure, and one of the skeletons is estimated to at least 6 foot 2 inches and possibly even more. So this person would have absolutely dwarfed everyone else. As a comparison, the average height of people in Europe at the same time was around 5 foot 2 inches, and it would be many thousands of years until they got anywhere close. There's also evidence to suggest that the tallest members of this ancient Chinese society held a higher level of social status. They were buried in tombs, had access to better quality food, and possibly even had longer lifespans. Perhaps this allowed them to pass their genes on more effectively, which will explain why their people remained so tall for so long. Number 13. Potential Cyclops skull. Cyclopses played a prominent role in Greek mythology, where there were said to be giant humans with just one central eye. It's long been wondered whether any such creatures existed, because otherwise, where would they have got their inspiration from? For a long time it was assumed, however, that they were just a fictional creation, but a recent discovery suggests they could actually be real. An archaeological dig found this huge skull with just one eye socket in the center, just like the descriptions of a cyclops. It tallies with reports from the ancient Greeks, who also claimed to have found skulls like this, and was part of the reason their legends included these monsters. There's no disputing the fact that these skulls exist, and if they don't actually come from a cyclops, then what other yet to be discovered creature are they truly from? Number 12. Massive human tooth. Human teeth can come in all shapes and sizes, but based on how big our skulls can grow, there's a limit to how large our teeth can feasibly be. This proved to be quite confusing then, when a paleontologist was searching through the stores of Hong Kong in search of dragon teeth. While he was looking through a drawer in an apothecary shop, his eyes focused on a particularly strange specimen that looked like a huge human molar tooth. Based on its size, it suggested the person it came from would have been almost 12 feet tall and weighed as much as 1,000 pounds. The question remains, is this tooth actually from a human that was a giant and indicative of an entire species of them, or does it come from another animal that was equally as large? Number 11. Teutobochus. The Teutons were an ancient Germanic tribe that was mentioned by the Romans as a worthy adversary, and who had a rich mythology just like every other culture at that time. One of their legends was of Teutobochus, who was their king, and he was said to be a giant. For a long time, the story was seen as just that, but things changed in 1613, while some builders were digging foundations near a castle in Dauphiny. The field they had been working in was known as the Giants Field, and at a depth of about 18 feet, they discovered a tomb made from bricks that was 30 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 8 feet tall. On it was the inscription Theotokos Rex, which translates to mean the Teuton King. As soon as it was possible, they opened the tomb to see what had been buried in such a manner, and they found a complete human skeleton that was itself just over 25 feet long and 10 feet wide from shoulder to shoulder. The teeth were described as being the size of an ox's foot, and its shin bone was 4 feet long. This was such an incredible find that the bones were put on display in Paris, and the legend of the Teuton King was reborn. There were those who disputed the claims though, who suggested they were actually bones from one of Hannibal's elephants, or maybe a mastodon, but nothing was proved conclusively. Today, unfortunately, the location of the bones is completely unknown, so we can't use modern techniques to determine their true origin. What do you think? Is the story believable, or is it a case of people choosing to believe what they wanted to? Number 10. The Giant of Castelnau. In 1890, anthropologist Georges Vacher de la Pouge was working at a Bronze Age cemetery at Castelnau-le-Lay in France and made a remarkable discovery. Within the sediment used to bury the graves were 3 bone fragments that dated back to around the Neolithic period too. When he measured the humerus, tibia, and part of the femur, he realized that the human they must have come from would have been at least 11 feet tall. He took an image of them along with a normal sized humerus bone from a human, which shows quite how much longer and thicker they were. De Pouge was absolutely convinced that they came from a human, and when there were studies at the University of Montpellier, the experts didn't necessarily disagree with him, but did note that the bones show signs of very unusual growth. The whereabouts of the bones, however, are not currently known, and there have therefore not been any modern studies conducted on them. They are, though, regarded as some of the best pieces of evidence to support the idea that human giants used to exist, and they're not the only bones that have been found in France that do so. 4 years later, new reports emerged about 3 abnormally large human skulls had been found, which seems to have come from people that were up to 15 feet tall, and giant-like skeletons were also reportedly unearthed across the border on the Spanish side of the Pyrenees, and these were dated to the Neolithic period as well, just like the bones from Castelnau. If these bones truly did come from giants, it would mean there must have been a whole group of them that lived in the area alongside our ancestors. Number 9. The Cryal Mound Giants. Evidence has been found of a community of giants living in North America as well. The Cryal Mound in South Charleston, West Virginia, is a burial site that was built by the Adena culture at some point between 250 and 150 BC. Once complete, it was 173 feet across and 33 feet tall, but the conical top was taken off by locals in 1840 to place a judge's podium on top to oversee horse races. By the 1880s, researchers became curious about how the mound was built and so began to excavate it in 1883. There were 13 skeletons inside, 11 of which were at the base. They were arranged with one in the middle, who was the most important, and with the other 10 arranged around him like the spokes of a wheel. This central man's bones were much bigger than the others, and estimates place him at being almost 7 feet tall. Was this a group of people who were led by a giant? Again, this wasn't the only find in the area, which lends credibility to the notion that giants once lived among us as part of our communities. A few decades earlier, a report in the Western Literary Messenger said that a giant skeleton had been found at a vineyard in East Wheeling and that it was almost 11 feet tall. Further giants were found that ranged between 6 feet 7 inches and 7 feet 6 inches, and a few decades later, their remains were still being unearthed, with the discovery of a human skeleton from someone who was almost 8 feet tall. Number 8. 10-foot giants found in Ohio. Elsewhere in America, there are other burial mounds that contain the remains of giant people too. In Ohio, the bones of humans that were up to 10 feet tall were found in 2 separate sites. One of the places was a burial mound just outside of Cleveland, and the other was just to the south of Cincinnati. In both, the giant skeleton was arranged in a similar way to the one at the Cryal Mounds, and give further evidence that giants were much more common than we had previously thought. In 1833, reports in local newspapers detailed how soldiers in California had been digging at a mount in California where they found the skeleton of a man that was at least 12 feet tall, surrounded by Stone Age artifacts, and had double rows of upper and lower teeth, each that was said to be the size of a horse's. And in 1877 in Kansas City, Missouri, one of the largest human skulls to have ever been found was unearthed. Here, a mound opened because of a freak weather event, and a series of giant footprints were revealed, along with an enormous skull that came from someone that was an estimated 30 feet tall. Number 7. The Catalina Island Giant. Today, the 22 by 8 mile Catalina Island, which lies around 22 miles to the southwest of Los Angeles, is a popular tourist destination for those looking to get away. But it's been used for thousands of years, and some rather interesting discoveries have been made there. The first evidence of human settlements on the island date to 9,000 years ago, and it changed hands a number of times before being purchased by chewing gum pioneer William Wrigley Jr. and turned into a tourist resort. Between 1919 and 1928, though, a local called Ralph Glidden conducted a series of archaeological digs and found as many as 800 ancient burial sites. Amongst the countless relics that he retrieved, his most important discoveries, and the ones he was proudest of, were the enormous bones that were theorized to come from humans who stood between 7 and 9 feet tall. He became convinced that the island was once home to a race of fair-skinned, blue-eyed giants, and the story was picked up by national newspapers. There was, as you'd expect, a great deal of skepticism, but he wasn't the only one to have ever found such large human remains in that location. In 1913, a German doctor also found an 8-foot-tall skeleton, and in 1959 a series of 7-foot-tall skeletons were found that had painted skulls, a double set of teeth, and 6 digits on each hand and foot. Could this be proof that giants once thrived on Catalina Island? And could this have been where they originated in North America? Number 6. Colorado River Giants. A report from the Arizona Gazette from April 1909 suggests that giants may have once lived in that area too. According to the story, explorer G.E. Kincaid was rafting along the Colorado River, where he noticed a strange tunnel leading to the bedrock. He went in to see what he could find, and it took him to a cavern that was at least 1 mile underground. At the end of the tunnel was a series of fortifications that contained artifacts such as copper weapons, tools, a mysterious large statue, and some ancient tablets carved with inscriptions that he was unable to translate. What really blew his mind, though, were the mummies that were stored there, each of which was covered in dark shrouds and contained bodies of at least 9 feet in height. Was this then a ceremonial burial ground for the supersized humans that once lived along the river? And who was responsible for putting them there? Kincaid had his own suggestions about the reasoning behind this cave in one of the first documented cases of an anti-government conspiracy theory. He believed that the authorities had sealed off the area on purpose to prevent people from finding out the truth, that giants had migrated to the Americas thousands of years ago from parts of Asia. Number 5. Giant finger in Egypt. Due to the huge interest in ancient Egyptian society, Egypt is one of the most archaeologically explored areas in the world. Things that have been found there don't always relate to the society ruled by the pharaohs though, or maybe could explain why the Egyptians managed to become so powerful and accomplished. In 1988, a grave robber showed one of his findings to a select group of people. According to Gregor Spori, an entrepreneur who was present at the time, the item was a mummified human finger that was almost 15 inches long. Researchers who saw the finger believed it must have come from a person that was at least 16 feet tall, and was evidence that giant humans were present in Egypt at some point in its history. The grave robber was protective over the finger and only allowed a few photographs to be taken. He refused to sell it even when offered a substantial amount of money, and currently its whereabouts is unknown. Spotty, though, gave more details about the supposed finger in an interview in 2012. He said that the package it was kept in was oblong in shape and had a particularly musky odor. The finger was bent and had mold growing on it. The finger now appears to be lost to history, but presumably there must be more buried somewhere in Egypt if it was in fact real. Perhaps it's just a matter of time until categorical proof of Egyptian giants is found once and for all. Number 4. Giant Ecuadorian skeletons. In 2013, a local living around 70 miles from the city of Cuenca in Ecuador discovered a mysterious giant skeleton sticking out of the ground. It had been exposed by recent flooding in the area and immediately stood out because of its size. Researchers were called in to take a closer look, and they determined that it was the remains of a female who had died around 600 years ago. A ribcage and a skull were found at first, but further digging revealed the entire skeleton, which was 7 feet and 4 inches tall. Importantly, the bones didn't show any signs of disease that could explain why a normal human would grow to such a size, and she had died when she was 60 years old, which is much longer than people with gigantism are typically expected to live for. Further excavations have shown that she wasn't the only giant from the region either. To date, more than half a dozen skeletons have been found, all of which are between 7 and 8 feet tall and date back to the same time period, between the 15th and 16th centuries. Is this then proof that giants lived on the South American continent as well? Along with the other discoveries elsewhere on the planet, this could mean that giants were far more prevalent than we ever imagined and lived all over the world. Number 3. Eureka! a giant. In July of 1877, while looking for potential sites for mines near the town of Eureka in Nevada, a team of prospectors found something completely different, a series of bones that appeared to have come from a giant. They were surrounded by solid quartzite, so had to be broken free, and when the group saw the full extent of what they had uncovered, they could hardly believe their eyes. The bones all came from a human leg and foot, and one of them, which stretches from the heel to the knee, was 39 inches long, which is twice the size that you'd expect from a human of a normal height. Many decades later, another discovery was made nearby, which supports the notion that this was once a land inhabited by giants. Two investigators were exploring Lovelock Cave, and they found a handprint, but this was much larger than the ones you see on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They released a series of pictures to show just how huge they were, and estimates suggest that for a hand to be that big, the person would have been at least 18 feet tall. Number 2. West Virginia Giant. These next findings were made in West Virginia, and if true, suggest there must have been a large community of giant people living in this region of the US a long time ago. In the town of Wheeling, a set of huge bones were found in the grounds of a vineyard owned by the local sheriff. It was extremely decayed, but clearly from a human, and the workers put the bones together into their original position. The resulting skeleton was somewhere between 10 and 11 feet, and the teeth were said to be the size of those from a horse. The find became a popular attraction in the town, where the bones were put on display at the sheriff's office. There are, therefore, quite a few images of the skeleton with people standing next to it, but frustratingly, it disappeared in the following years, so it isn't available to run modern tests on to determine its true origins. Number 1. Caucasus Mountain Giants. Finally, we go to the country of Georgia, long associated with legends of giants and a place that featured heavily in Greek mythology as the destination of Jason and the Argonauts. In those stories, the heroes encountered giants. So could there be any truth to the myths? Well, in 2014, a researcher was excavating a site of interest, and he found the remains of two large men in a cave that appeared to be sitting at a table. Full skeletons were not found, and he only uncovered a few sets of bones, but these, along with a series of ancient stone structures and inexplicably large footprints in the area, all point towards the presence of giants. The bones were sent to a Georgian museum to be tested, but since that happened, the man who discovered them has died, and they've been lost. Could there be a cover-up to prevent us from finally knowing the truth? And is there still more evidence waiting to be found? Local stories tell of other places where skeletons have been found of people who were at least 10 feet tall. So perhaps if we want to find out the truth about giants, Georgia's the best place to search. Which of these do you think is the most compelling evidence that giants actually exist? And what would you do if you found yourself face to face with a giant? Make sure to let us know in the comments section. Also, check out our other cool stuff showing up on screen right now. See you next time.